If we want to talk about US dollar global dominance, I think that we start with talking about stables. I mean, when this is implemented, it could revolutionize the global financial marketplace. It'll drive really billions, if not trillions, over the course of the next several decades into US treasuries with the way that folks are interacting with payment rails.
Friends, DeFi is having a moment. Uniswap Labs web app and wallet connect you to the excitement. Swapping and bridging are simple, low-cost, and lightning-fast across 13 chains, including Base, Arbitrum, and Unichain, the new Layer 2 network designed for DeFi. Thanks to deep liquidity on Uniswap Protocols, you get minimal price impact on every trade, now with even greater efficiency through Uniswap v4. Swap, send, on-ramp, off-ramp, and bridge into a bright future. Get started at uniswap.org.
When it comes to quarterbacking U.S. President Donald Trump's crypto agenda, the president tapped former college football player turned Republican congressional nominee and MAGA loyalist Bo Hines to play a key role on his crypto council. Hines has been working closely with crypto czar David Sachs to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world. Joining me now to discuss is Bo Hines. He's the executive director of the Presidential Council of Advisors for Digital Assets. Welcome, Bo, to CoinDesk.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
So a big story is the strategic Bitcoin reserve that was signed by executive order by President Trump. You've told CoinDesk that you're excited to look into ways to add active investment to further build the government's new Bitcoin reserve. You also said at the Digital Assets Summit this week that the Trump administration wants to acquire as much Bitcoin as we get. So, the U.S. has already acquired about 200,000 BTC. That's worth about $17 billion. Strategy CEO Michael Saylor is suggesting that the U.S. acquire up to 25% of the Bitcoin supply by 2035. What would be the target amount for the United States in your view?
Well, I get asked this question a lot, and I think the answer to that, like I said at the summit yesterday, is as much as we can possibly get, so long as it's in budget neutral ways that don't cost the taxpayer a dime. I think we have a lot of high IQ people in the building that are working on this, and folks over at the Treasury office and folks over at Commerce, working with the internal working group that was set up in the first digital assets EO. We'll be able to come up with ways to accumulate more really over the course of the next few years and beyond that. I mean, look, we view Bitcoin as being digital gold. That's why we set up the strategic Bitcoin reserve in the way that we did, right? Bitcoin is a commodity. It's not a security. As our AI and cryptos are, David Sachs likes to say, it has the immaculate conception, meaning that there's no issuer. It has intrinsic stored value that's traditionally accepted. And we feel like it's in the best interest of Americans to hold on to this asset long term and accumulate as much as we can get. That's why we've akin this to digital gold and talked about building the digital Fort Knox for the United States. And, you mentioned the Bitcoin that we have possession of. We've actually been in possession of nearly 400,000 Bitcoin. We sold roughly half of that prematurely at about, I think it was close to $370 million is what we sold it for. If we would have held on to that, it would have been worth $17 billion today. I mean, it just goes to show you how important this asset is and what we can do with it to benefit the American people. One thing that I've said repeatedly throughout the media circuit is that I think it's really nice that we have a president that's actually looking to accumulate assets for Americans rather than take it away, unlike the last regime that we had here at the White House. But we feel very confident about our plan. We feel confident about the internal working group that was set up in that first EO. And I think we're going to have tremendous ideas on how to accomplish this.
When we think of a strategic reserve, we think about the U.S. acquiring military equipment, storing grain, storing food sources in times of crisis. What is the emergency purpose of storing and acquiring Bitcoin for the United States taxpayer?
Well, look, I mean, just like gold, it's finite, right? There's only so much of it. And we know that there's going to be a race amongst other actors, potential adversarial actors, to accumulate as much as they can possibly get as well. As the resource becomes more thin, the price, could tend to go up. And that's what we've seen over the course of the last few years. And, while we're not financial advisors and we ask anyone that's thinking about investing in a volatile space, whether it be crypto or somewhere else, to consult an expert before they do. We view it in the long-term interest of the United States to hold on to assets that have intrinsic stored value. And so that's why we've separated Bitcoin really from other digital assets. And you saw that with the U.S. Digital Assets National Stockpile. Here we allow, the Treasury basically to act as a broker of these assets to decide what to do with them. But I think part of that and our thinking here was to recognize Bitcoin for being unique, but also, show that we're willing to see and see through what really should be a thriving digital asset space more generally in the United States. We want to see innovation here. We want to onshore folks here. We love what's happening across multiple ecosystems. We want to continue that development and make sure that American entrepreneurs can thrive. I mean, this is really an industry that's been beaten down and kicked down over the course of the last decade and a half, specifically under the Biden regulatory regime. They were victims of lawfare and unfair regulatory practices. They were treated differently than really any other industry that we've ever seen before. And so I think it's high time that these actors have the ability to innovate here in the United States, do it in a way that benefits the American people. And we look forward to ushering that in.
Michael Saylor has talked about it being a strategic and security purpose. That's why we need a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and that in the future we'll all be interacting with Bitcoin as digital capital. And to dominate cyberspace, the United States needs to be at the forefront of that. Is that something that resonates with this administration?
Well, I mean, any resource that's finite that has value, you want the most of it. And I think that we can say that, we'd like to have the largest stockpile or reserve, I should say, than the rest of our adversaries across the globe. I mean, this is something that we're keen on holding on to for the American people, and we want to continue to grow that, as we've said. In terms of what the national security interests are, I think it's the same with any resource. I mean, we want the most of every resource we can get a hold of that has that intrinsic stored value. So, I mean, I'd leave it at that. We'll see how it continues to play out, but I think that we're on the right path to deliver good results for the American people.
So the executive order suggests acquiring Bitcoin in a budget-neutral way. Senator Cynthia Lummis has reintroduced the Bitcoin Act, suggesting that Fed earnings and gold certificates could be used to acquire Bitcoin. Any ideas what methods are on the table here?
Well, I mean, I think that Senator Lummis is really moving the ball forward on Capitol Hill, not only with the SPR, but many other initiatives as well. We talk about stable coins and market destruction, everything else that's happening up on the Hill. It's all exciting stuff for the space. I think that she has a very interesting idea about a budget neutral way in which we could acquire more. I think that she talks about the gold certificates that are dating back to like the 1970s, in which we could realize their actual value of today and use that to purchase more Bitcoin. That's just one creative way, and we're going to have these conversations with the interagency working group that was set up, and we'll sort through and flesh out the best ideas and decide how we're going to implement this. But we're going to do that in short order. We want to move quickly. As David has said, the AI and cryptos are. He's just a brilliant human being, by the way, and understands the space really better than anybody, just truly inside and out. He said we're moving at tech speed, and I think that's something that we want to continue with. This is like a startup.
Timeline of when you might come up with the forefront of the ideas that you want to
Well, we have these landmarks that are really important from the first digital assets executive order. We had the 30-day landmark, which asked basically all of interagency actors to do an internal audit and review of any rules and regulations that touch the digital asset space and provide us with a report about what those were. We've been able to comb through those, and now we're approaching the 60-day landmark, which requires them to produce recommendations for the working group. And what we'll do as we work towards the 120-day landmark, we'll compile these recommendations and build out a comprehensive report that we can provide to the president. And I think as part of that, we'll certainly be having conversations about the SBR and many other interagency rulemaking activities as well. I mean, the president made it very clear at the crypto summit this past week that he wanted to get rid of any rule or reg that undergirded Operation Choke Point 2.0. So that's certainly going to be a focus for us in our first internal working group meeting. And we're going to continue to sort through the decks and make sure that this industry can thrive without those burdensome regulations that prevented institutional actors from interacting with digital asset firms. So that's certainly the top of our priority list. So is the strategic reserve. We have a lot of work to do, but I think we're off to a great start.
There was some disappointment that XRP, Cardano's ADA, Solana were not mentioned in this strategic reserve executive order after Trump had posted that they might be. David Sachs said traders were reading too much into those comments. And so I'm wondering, are they still in play?
Well, they'll certainly be a part of the digital assets national stockpile, right? I mean, we're going to accumulate as many assets from other ecosystems that we can. And I think that part of the reason that those assets were mentioned is it's just based on market cap, right? I mean, we talked about the top 5 biggest market cap players in the space. But, with that, we're excited about what everyone's developing and what everyone's working on. We want to allow these American entrepreneurs to thrive and continue to build their ecosystems out, continue to work on advancing digital asset technology here in the U.S. I've been asked by a lot of people, what's your message to folks that went offshore over the course of the last decade? I have a clear message to them. It's welcome home. I think we're going to create the best environment for innovation that could possibly exist and deliver on the president's promise to make this country the crypto capital of the planet.
Well, for some people, Bitcoin represents an alternative financial system, an alternative to the dollar. Does this pose a threat to the US dollar? What does Bitcoin and the US dollar function with or against each other in the future look like?
I don't think they're competitive at all. I mean, the U.S. dollar is very different than Bitcoin, which is a commodity. I think too we should talk about a little bit what's happening on the Hill in terms of legislation. We talked about the stablecoin legislation with the Genius Act that just got passed out of Senate Banking Committee with an 18-6 bipartisan vote. I mean, this is monumental stuff that's happening there. And if we want to talk about U.S. dollar global dominance, I think that we start with talking about stables. I mean, when this is implemented, it could revolutionize the global financial marketplace. It'll drive, really billions, if not trillions, over the course of the next several decades into U.S. Treasuries with the way that folks are interacting with payment rails and the way that they're interacting with their financial systems in their day-to-day lives. So, we have some really key priorities that are happening on Capitol Hill in terms of stables and along with market structure, just to provide the regulatory clarity that the space needs in order to continue to innovate here and continue to lead the globe in terms of this technology.
Recently, the House Financial Services Committee held a hearing on stablecoins. What is the significance of these hearings? What can we expect? And is there a preference for U.S. stablecoin issuers? And would that leave Tether out of the picture going forward?
Look, we believe in marketplace competition, and we're going to let the legislative process mature before we start providing detailed feedback on the certain, particular language in these bills. But what I can say is we want the U.S. dollar to continue to thrive. We want to continue to allow innovation here in the United States. We want all of the best players in this space to be operating within, the boundaries of this country. And I think that the folks on Capitol Hill recognize that. I think that industry luminaries recognize that. I think one thing that's really exciting just to mention is just in our interactions and meetings with traditional financial folks, this is going to revolutionize the way that their systems work. And I think that they're on the forefront of adoption, trying to learn as much as they can about what this process is going to look like so they can deliver the best products to their customers as well. So we talk about mending the gap between TradFi and the digital asset space and really providing that bridge for institutional adoption because, we can pass basically, key pieces of legislation, but if we don't have the institutional adoption there, then it really becomes a null and void effort. So I think that, really everyone from institutional players to digital asset players to the folks on Capitol Hill are working, very well together to pull this thing in a comprehensive way that allows the United States to dominate the space. And I think that's really exciting. I think the American people should be excited about that. I know that folks in this industry definitely are. But I think even our colleagues up on the Hill on the other side of the aisle recognize how important it is for our country. So there's a lot. We have the tailwinds at our back.
Is the administration engaging with Tether at all? Because from the White House Crypto Summit, I noticed that they were absent.
The administration is engaging with everybody. I think I've had no less than 100 meetings with industry players in this space. Part of our role in this office is the way I see it is to act as an administrator between White House policy, interagency activity, industry, and what's happening on Capitol Hill. We want to make sure that everyone's singing from the same sheet of music. We want to make sure that everyone's rowing in the same direction. And it's no different with the stablecoin players as it is with the folks that care more about energy and mining. We want to pull these people together because we have a very unique opportunity in time to make monumental changes as it relates to this space and cement our place as the dominant global player. And that's what we're focused on. So, I meet with folks, big and small, from the Goliaths in the space to folks that are starting new enterprises. I think that good ideas can come from anywhere. And I encourage, anyone to reach out to our office and schedule a meeting because we want to hear from you.
You talked about ending Choke Point 2.0, which was the covert effort to target and debank crypto companies in the previous administration. The SEC has now dropped many of those previous cases that were basically regulating by enforcement. So are banks going to start banking crypto companies? Which ones? Is the president speaking to any of them in particular?
Well, I certainly think that they will. I mean, look at what Hester's been able to do at the SEC over the course of the last 8 weeks. I mean, she's a phenomenal actor for the digital asset space. I think we're really excited about Brian incoming at the CFTC. We have phenomenal partners over at Treasury that are also working on clearing the decks of anything that undergirded Operation Choke Point 2.0. And we'll continue to work on these things. I don't think that we're going to, stick our nose into deciding really what the marketplace should in terms of, which institutional players are working with which digital asset firms. But I think that we need to provide the pathway and the bridge for that institutional adoption to occur. And I think that we're in the process of doing that. And we'll continue to move quickly on delivering on the president's promises.
You attended law school at Wake Forest University, studying issues like how the CFTC regulates cryptocurrencies. So I'm wondering, how does that inform your take on what cryptocurrencies fall within the SEC versus the CFTC jurisdictions?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, again, Hester's made some great clarifications for the space over the course of the last couple of weeks. She put out, a letter, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, basically, articulating that meme coins are not a security, right? And so, we're providing this clarity as we go along, and these actors are moving very expeditiously to give as much information as they can so that the marketplace understands what they're actually dealing with and what protections they have in certain spaces. With that being said, I think that there's some really smart folks up on the Hill that have been working on these things for quite a long time. And, we'll help usher and guide them from feedback that we're getting from industry and other interagency actors. But, we'll work on market structure legislation to provide that clarity that the space needs. I think that there are several ideas and ways in which you could categorize, certain aspects of the space. And I think that we need to let the process mature a little bit and continue to work through these things before we provide, more detailed answers on that.
We've heard from Eric Trump, the son of President Trump, talk about a zero capital gains tax on American crypto. Is that something also in the works? What are your thoughts on that?
We're working on the tax issues and going through that with the interagency working group, but we're going to have our first meeting this week, actually this afternoon. And so I'm sure a lot of these things will come up in this meeting, and I'll be able to provide, much more elaborate answers for you maybe next time that we have a conversation.
When the president first tapped you to play a key role on his crypto council, many people in the crypto industry didn't know who you were. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about your background and what brought you to Bitcoin. I understand that you were playing football in 2014, and there was a Bitcoin St. Petersburg Bowl that was sponsoring Bitcoin, and that introduced you. But I'd like to hear more about your interactions with crypto and your thoughts on the whole digital asset ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, so you got that correct. I mean, my first introduction to the crypto space was when I was a freshman football player at North Carolina State, and just by happenstance ended up playing in the Bitcoin Bowl, and that really sparked my interest there, and ended up buying my first Bitcoin shortly thereafter. When I transferred to Yale, I had a few guys that I used to trade with up there, and this is back in really what was the Wild West of the space. This is back when we were using Electrum wallets. Folks still have those today. But we were trading across multiple ecosystems really when, it wasn't cool, or the other folks that were studying finance really didn't understand it up there. And most of my teammates from Yale obviously have gone on to work, in traditional financial marketplaces. But I stayed very active on the investment side, just from a retail perspective, for most of my adult life. And then obviously had the chance to study these things at Wake Forest Law School. I ended up starting a growth equity firm with 4 other partners, and we worked a lot in the data tech and marketing space, but I stayed active in this space again from just a retail perspective. And when this idea started being kicked around on the transition team, I thought it was just a phenomenal opportunity to jump in and offer the insights that I had garnered over the course of really the last decade. I felt like I could empathize, not to the fullest extent, but somewhat with the players that have gone through what they've been through, really over the course of the last few years. And we wanted to help right the ship here. I mean, I think it's so imperative that the United States is the leader of this space, just globally, and that we dominate digital asset financial technological advancement. I think it's something that could alter the course of financial marketplaces for the rest of history. And it was just too exciting of an opportunity to turn down. I'm very thankful for the president and his leadership here. I mean, he's moving very quickly. He's obviously started to deliver on basically most of the promises he's made on the campaign trail to this space. And I can assure you we're not done yet. I mean, we want to usher in the golden age, as President Trump has said, for digital assets here in the United States. I think that we're well on our way of doing that. But we still have a lot more work to do, and we're excited to do it.
In your view, where are we in crypto adoption versus where we need to be?
I think that if we get through stablecoin legislation, we get through market structure legislation, provide the clarity that the marketplace needs in order to thrive. I think if we can clear the deck with some of these burdensome and over regulatory actions that the Biden regime took, I think we're going to be in a fantastic spot for institutional adoption to occur, and we'll see how fast the marketplace responds to that. But what I know about the American people is that they're very innovative and they like to move, expeditiously as well. So, and when this clarity is given to them, I think they're going to take the ball and run with it. To use a football analogy for you there, and I think we'll end up, being that global dominant player. And I think that truly, it can provide just enormous success for the United States in terms of our financial systems.
I saw that you're also the CEO of Today is America, which describes itself as a pro-America Gen Z anti-woke media company. And a subgroup there launched Restore the Republic, which is a meme coin RTR that soared to a $150 million market cap. And it tanked when Eric Trump denied that family had any involvement in it. I'm wondering, did you have any involvement in it? Do you have some thoughts on meme coins? Should they be regulated at all, or is it just buyer beware?
Well, so I think there's a little bit of a mischaracterization there. Students for Trump actually engaged, the digital brand itself engaged with RTR well after its launch, just to partner with them in order to promote the president's efforts to be reelected. In terms of meme coins themselves, look, I think it's a fun space. I think it's a space that a lot of people engage in. And Hester said just over the course of the last 2 weeks, can't remember exactly when it was, but she articulated this very well. Meme coins are collectibles. They're not a security. So understand that you don't have the full protections that you would have investing in a security in that space. And I think that people can enter into that at their own risk. And I'm not a financial advisor, but I'd say that be cautious investing in any volatile space, including the meme coin space, because things can change very rapidly, as we know. And I think that ultimately this is about encouraging innovation. It's about encouraging more people to be active participants in this space. And if that drives more traffic, to digital assets, then that's a good thing. Obviously, we want to make sure that people are protected, but people also have to take their own individual risk and weigh those consequences of what they're doing with their own funds. We just want to make sure that the marketplace truly understands what they're actually getting into before they invest in something. And I think that we'll do that with regulatory clarity.
Bo, thank you so much for your insights. Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
That was the Executive Director of the Presidential Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, Bo Hines.